Hey class, I wanted to take a few minutes and make a short video to talk about the Crito and touch on its major themes, and then maybe grab a little bit of the Phaedo as well to round off Plato's presentation of Socrates. In the Crito, we find Socrates sitting in jail, essentially awaiting his execution, and his friend Crito comes to visit him. And in the opening conversation between Socrates and Crito, we learn a couple of things. One, we learn that Socrates has been in jail for some time, awaiting his execution, probably at least a couple weeks. We find out then that the execution is now imminent because the religious festival that was sort of holding up his execution is ending. And we find that Crito, Socrates' friend, has been there quite often to visit him, even at strange hours in the middle of the night. And Crito is able to do this because he has essentially been bribing the guard to allow him to come and go as he chooses. And this is an important point about Crito, which is that he doesn't really respect the laws of Athens. And we find out later in his conversations with Socrates that Crito's disrespect for the laws of Athens is essentially rooted in his understanding of Socrates' teaching. Socrates and Crito agree that it would be best for the wise to rule. And they also agree that most people, the demos, right, and remember Athens is a democracy, are not wise. So if most people are not wise, and those are the people making the laws, then it seems to Crito that one has really no obligation to follow the law. The only thing that compels Crito to follow the law is sort of strategic considerations about avoiding trouble. Crito doesn't want to go to jail himself, and he doesn't want to be killed or be unpopular, so he'll make certain strategic considerations to avoid getting in trouble. But essentially, if he can avoid getting in trouble, then he sees no reason to follow the law. So he'll bribe the guard and not worry about it, and he, of course, has a plan for Socrates to escape jail and go to another city outside of Athens. Again, we won't pay the penalty for breaking the law, so we might as well break it because the law was made by idiots. Socrates disagrees with Crito, and he doesn't want to break out of jail. And Socrates thinks that he should stay in jail, but it's hard to see why, given sort of Crito's Socratic premises, right? Given, as we saw in the Apology, that Socrates thinks that we should listen to the wise rather than to fools, and given that most people are not wise, and given that laws in Athens are made by the majority, then it would seem to readily follow for Socrates that there is no reason to follow the laws of Athens. If that was the case, or if Socrates agreed with that line of argument and chose to escape from jail, there is a sense in which he would be proving the argument of his accusers. He would be proving that he is a bad citizen. So Socrates is in a bit of a pickle. On the one hand, he essentially agrees with Crito's premises, but he doesn't want to accept his conclusion. So to get around that, Socrates will not argue that Crito is wrong and somehow the people of Athens are actually wise or anything like that. Socrates will argue that despite their foolishness, he still owes them loyalty. And despite their injustice, he still owes them loyalty. The way he'll get at this is by sort of personifying the laws of Athens in the last part of the dialogue. And these laws will explain to Socrates that if he escapes, he will essentially be murdering them. Because, as the laws explain, if we prescribe punishments and the punishments are not carried out, then essentially the law is meaningless and we are essentially dead laws. Why would it be bad for Socrates to kill the laws, since the laws are trying to kill him, right? The laws have sentenced him to death. Socrates' argument here basically depends on a kind of analogy between the law and the parents. That just as parents can discipline and punish their children, the law can discipline and punish the citizens that live under it. And just as the parent has that right, at least in ancient Athens, even if they were foolish and stupid, just by virtue of being a parent, so too do the laws have that right, even if the laws themselves are stupid and foolish. Simply because Socrates lives in Athens, he has to follow the rules of Athens, even if he thinks that they are bad rules made for bad reasons. Right? As the laws say in the dialogue, you could have moved away at any time. Athens allows people to move out with no penalty, so you could have done that, Socrates. But you chose to live in our city. And so essentially the argument that the laws is making is a version of the parents' argument, my house, my rules. However, they then add that now that we've sentenced you to death, right, you can't escape. Now you're confined to the house, and we're going to execute you. How convincing this argument really is largely dependent on, I guess you could say, what you think of the rights of parents, right? While I do think as a parent I have the right to, discipline my children, I certainly don't think it extends to jailing them or executing them. But in ancient Athens, parents had more authority than, we do now. So that's essentially the argument of the Crito. I wanted you all to read the last couple pages of the Phaedo as well, just so that you could see the death of Socrates. And when Socrates finally dies in the Phaedo, Crito is there to take care of business and to do his best to make sure that Socrates and his family is taken care of. Interestingly enough, Socrates doesn't seem to care about any of that. Right? He sends his wife and children away so that he can spend the last few minutes, talking with his friends about philosophy. Crito asks him where we should be buried, and Socrates gives him a hard time because I'm not going to be there, it's just going to be my body. And in general, Socrates, I guess you could say, goes out the way he lived,